Ba-da-ba-ba, ba-da-ba-ba. All right. Promoter 101. 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 Promoter 101.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Andrew Dreskin of Ticketfly. I am going to be coming to you live and direct on Promoter 101, just me and Steiny.
I'm Luke Pierce, and this is a milestone episode, number 20, Promoter 101. Joined today by Dan Steinberg.
Hard to believe it. We've already done 20 of these bad boys, Luke, but I'm excited that we broke 10,000 plays this week. Guess my high school guidance counselor was wrong about me. He can suck it. Just kidding. That dude is awesome. He got me out of Spanish.
This is a great episode we have lined up. Later, we're going to be joined by the Warped Tour's Kevin Lyman and best-selling author of How to Get to the Top, Jeffrey J. Fox, as well as the Fox City Performing Arts Center's Gerald B. Henley.
What an all-star lineup this week. We're also excited to announce the podcast can now be found at Encore Digital Weekly magazine. We want to welcome their readers just discovering the podcast.
Encore Weekly's emails comes out on Friday morning. It's a fantastic way to catch up on industry news. Plus, they carry some awesome features, including the Left Sits letter and industry profiles in the hot seat with Larry LeBlanc. To sign up for the free weekly Encore newsletter, go to celebrityaccess.com/encore and click on the Enroll tab at the top of the newsletter.
Hi, it's Rick Greenstein. I'm with the Gersh Agency, going to be on Promoter 101.
It's time for News of the Week.
Rolling Stone reported Coachella is seeking a new primetime headliner as the Queen Bee herself, Beyonce, dropped out at the urging of her doctors. I'm thinking baby daddy, Jay-Z, should really be responsible to fill that place, keeping in mind that her cancellation is kind of his fault. With that said, there are websites already taking bets and giving odds on who's going to headline, whether it's Adele, Lady Gaga, Green Day, Kanye, and pretty much every other pop star. My money is actually going to be on Katy Perry. Any thoughts from you, Luke?
I'm not at all surprised by this. The way that she looked at the Grammys, she was definitely very pregnant. There's no way that 3 months from now that she's going to be on that stage dancing around like crazy. She's already announced that she's coming back for the 2018 version of Coachella, so I don't think Jay-Z is going to pop in to replace her. One of those pop stars, Katy Perry, could be a great fix. Lady Gaga, Pink would be a great fix as well, too. So if I'm a betting man out there, I'm going to say it's not going to be Jay-Z for one of these things, and that the make good from the Rock Nation camp is going to come fully in 2018.
The design of the Grammy choreography was truly set up to be built around a slower dance pace than normal for her. So clearly it was already a concern coming into the Grammys. She pulled it off great, but I could see her not wanting to be in the middle of the desert on those 103-degree days under the lights dancing heavy. It makes sense.
It's earnings season on Wall Street, and Live Nation reported robust year-end and fourth quarter results. CEO Michael Rapino posted on Twitter Thursday night that this was their sixth consecutive year of record growth.
Now, growth doesn't necessarily mean profit. However, it looks like they're making real money at this point, and that's a good sign that the industry is super healthy. Good for them and all of us. Rising tides raises all ships.
Billboard's newest senior touring correspondent, our buddy Dave Brooks, reported that Eric Church cancels 25,000 tickets bought up by scalpers. It was an incredible undertaking by Eric Church's management and the Louis Messina Group, who's promoting the tour. It's an incredible undertaking and a ton of labor that Eric is never going to see back, that his manager is never going to see back. Really puts Eric firmly on the side of the fans.
Yeah, he's really taking a lesson right out of the Chance the Rapper book here. This shit is super cool. David Cassidy is saying that he's got dementia. It'd be super easy to make fun of the old Partridge Family star, but in all seriousness, our heart goes out to David and his family. This is a true bummer.
Poof goes $5 million. A New York court this week declares no performance rights for Flo and Eddie. Our friends over at Celebrity Access reporting the story.
We'll need to get the Turtles to call us up, invest a dime, and jump on the podcast and teach us that story about what's going on with them. On a final note, we have a correction. A few episodes back on the podcast, we talked about Paul McCartney's late wife, Linda. We mentioned her maiden name was Linda Eastman. and that she was heir to the Eastman Kodak fortune. It turns out, while she is an Eastman, she's not one of those Eastmans. Her father was Lee Eastman. Her mother was part of the Linder department store fortune, so she grew up pretty comfortable. So this was pointed out to us by a friend and listener, Larry Butler. So thank you, Larry, for pointing that out. We'd hate to pass on misinformation, and we definitely want to correct anything that we get wrong. So, Linda McCartney and Eastman, but not necessarily Eastman Kodak. Moving on.
I'm Nathan Hovsepian.
And I'm Adam Plon.
And we are with Royale Entertainment Company out of Missoula, Montana.
And we are on Promoter 101.
That's it for the news of the week. Let's catch up on Dan's Promoter 101 tweets from the past week. This is the part of the podcast where we break down the happenings in the world of the music industry as seen through Dan's lens on @TheJew on Twitter. When an act announces a return play to the market before the current day plays or even sells out.
Man, this is just poor planning. A serious lack of creativity, rebooking a market while you still have tickets available for the same act before it even plays out. This is just lame.
Dan, who was this?
It wasn't one of your acts. Don't worry about it.
When you're financially locked into a project with people that just keep changing the details of the deal.
My dad used to say, when a deal goes bad, it goes bad all the way. Meaning, once they fuck you, you're totally fucked. And I've noticed lately that you change one little thing, people make mistakes. You're changing a bunch of things, you're dealing with people that just don't know what the hell they're doing.
When you confirm Texas blues legend Ian Moore, and it makes your fucking week.
This is just me geeking out to a goddamn legend, Ian Moore, coming to the Pacific Northwest this summer. Pretty stoked about this one.
When you're sadly reminded why you use contracts with people.
Not everybody is a man of their word, and finding quality people can be a trick in this business. Was reminded of that again this week.
My name's Tom Windish, and I'm on Promoter 101.
This week's feature interview is the man behind the Vans Warped Tour, Kevin Lyman. Joining us for the session is ICM Partners Rick Farrell.
Promoter 101, we're at Polestar Live, and we're joined by a very dear old friend, Kevin Lyman. Thanks for taking the time to be with us today.
You're welcome. Congratulations on this. I see a lot of people taking a listen nowadays.
It's funny when hobbies go stupid, but yeah, it's great. Rick Farrell's joining us in the suite today.
Hello there.
Hey, Rick, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Great to be hanging with you, brother.
Yeah, good to see you guys.
So everybody knows the brand Van Warped Tour, but clearly you were in the business long before that. How'd you get your start?
My start started in college back in Cal Poly Pomona. I was a student, and that's about an hour from L.A. There was no Glass House. There was no Fox Theater. And that was like the early days of punk rock in Los Angeles. And I had a van. I found a few like-minded people, and we would drive into L.A. for Thursday night and go see X and Plim Souls, and it was an early time of music. And I was walking through campus one day, and I heard some music off in the distance, and I walked over there, and there was an outdoor noon concert. And I said, hey, what is this? And they said, hey, we put on concerts. I said, can I help out? And I fell in love with...
volunteered?
Yeah, volunteered. And I fell in love with live music at that very moment. I was kind of that lost student, which I talk at colleges a lot now, and my college life was more socialization than an education, and I think it's a balance. But then I was on the ski team. We needed to make money. There was bands in L.A. that I could pay $100 to come play in backyards. We would do 5 bands, $5 all the beer you could drink, rent a fraternity.
That sounded very licensed.
Yeah, rent out a fraternity house, pay them $1,000 for the night, get 14 kegs of beer, get a bunch of bands. When the beer ran out, we'd call the cops on our own show, bail out the back door, come back and pay them that. Later, that developed into more of getting to know bands. Back then, the Unforgiven, the Stepmothers, bands from out now, the Flamethrowers, these bands out in that area. And I started renting airport hangars. We were doing shows all over. Most of them would probably get me thrown in jail nowadays. I'd look back and say, I tell students don't do what we did. But I graduated college and from Cal Poly Pomona. I had a degree in recreation administration. I'd been running summer camps, and I went to Hawaii right out of college. And I ran a weight loss camp for girls, another non-serious profession, because our motto was lose weight, get a date, get a tan, get a man, you know? So
I bet the feminists are going to love you for that
nowadays
shit.
I'm sure that would fly. But I came back over, and we had done all these shows, and luckily by that experience, and I always tell people, if you want to break into this business, get as involved as early as possible doing something. Go volunteer for a wedding planner. That gives you all the things that happen in a show. You have to deal with the rock star, the bride. You have to deal with the cast. fast. You have to deal with the fans. You have to be able to think on your feet. Build your resume early. I was offered a job, $75 a night, to go down to Fender's Ballroom and stage manager for a local promoter, because the sound company I used to use at my college shows said, you'd be great at this. So I went down there, started working shows with bands like Lone Justice and the Blasters, and that was that kind of period. She was doing that. But the other promoter in the building was a Golden Voice, Gary Tovar.
The original
Golden Voice, the original founder of Golden Voice, and the largest marijuana distributor on the West Coast at the time. Dual careers. Not like, unlike today, being a promoter, you have to have multi-careers to survive. But Gary was brilliant in packaging, and a young guy named Paul Tollett, who actually I went to school with and was part of this activities board and was working for him. Perry Tollett, his brother, who owns the Glass House now, was a friend.
In Pomona.
Skip Page was a student there who's now very involved with Coachella. Ron ran SST Records coming out of school. He went in as a general manager with him. I worked in the clubs, and one night there was a co-promote, and it was with Motorhead in this club. And back then, Golden Voice was pretty much run by the fist. If a band didn't like what he said, he just beat you up. You know, it was a little more and more.
Oh, really? I've never heard that side of it.
And this was like really the first time I think they
very much not the Paul Tollett
No,
style.
Nothing with Paul Tollett. It was not Paul. It was, there was definitely a lot of faces.
Certainly not Gary's style.
There was definitely a lot of faces to Golden Voice at this point. There was a guy named the Clipboard that on oversold shows, you just dropped a 20 and it slid down the clipboard in the paper bag and you were on the guest list. It was a crazy time, definitely. But there was a show where they co-promoted a Motorhead show, which had an extensive writer. And I guess my qualification at that point was I could read, and I ran that show for them. And then
you were on point for production day.
Yeah, I was independent. And then they had some more shows. Golden Voice was starting to pick up the number of shows they were doing. They offered me some gigs to come in as a promoter rep. So basically, I was the promoter rep for Golden Voice, developed those early relationships with Rat Sound, who I still work with to these days. And we grew from there. It got to a point where I was running 320 shows a year of local production. I was always independent. I ran Golden Voice shows. I'd run some for Moss Jacobs in the Bob Marley days. Bill Silva would bring me down to San Diego sometimes to work with him. That's where Kevin Lyman Production Services was formed.
Nice. Okay, so that moved into you working through the scene for a long time and creating some other,
12, 13 years I was in the scene, and I was working every night, and there was a whole scene of music kind of growing out of the L.A. area. And those bands turned into the Red Hot Chili Peppers, turned into the Fishbones. We were doing 7 nights of the Ramones, and then Jane's Addiction. We were doing multiple nights with Jane's Addiction. This is when Gary kind of had his problems, and
they were sorting out what was going on.
And Paul took over, and Rick took over. I decided to remain independent, but I independently ran the shows.
Rick Van Satten,
who's passed away. But in 1991, Lollapalooza started, and they asked me to come out as the first stage manager of Lollapalooza. I had never been on the road. I'd never been out on the road. And that was those relationships. And I tell people, you never know where it's going to come from. Working so hard in the clubs and just being nice to people. That's really what this business is for young people. I say, just be nice. You never know when it's going to come back to you. And they offered me to go on this tour called Lollapalooza. Of course, I did.
Year one?
Year one. I had no idea that, I was so used to doing everything from catering to security to loading gear to, running the monitor desk if I had to. I went out on that tour, and all the old roadies thought I was going to crash and burn, which I about did because I tried to do too much the first couple days. And the 114 degrees in Phoenix, the start of that tour, some great stories around that. But I made it through that summer. I always told people that.
Was that Compton Terrace?
Compton Terrace, yeah.
Wow, gangster out there.
Danny Zalisco. One of my first moments with Danny Zalisco was, of course, backstage there was multiple dancers hanging out with Danny Zalisco. And I was that guy who looked at him and said, dude, I'll trade you 5 of them for one actual stagehand to help me load these trucks, because there was a lack of stagehands, but he always had lots of entertainment for people backstage.
And they're all on the payroll, so you might as well.
Yeah, there's a line item.
We had Stuart Ross on the podcast recently, and he talked about it wasn't so much a sound curfew or a light curfew. It was we have miles to go to rebuild this thing the next day.
Yeah, because
we got to be out of there.
It was brand new equipment. It was very lights were brand new. And I'll never forget 9 Inch Nails going on stage, and the lights were shooting back. Nothing was working, and Trent started trashing the gear and trashing more gear. We're kind of looking at each other going. Then he finally trashed his cold component that ran the whole show, and I go, I guess that's the end of the set. He did a very short set that night. Drove to San Diego, rebuilt everything that day. I pretty much had a meltdown because of heat stroke from the days of rehearsal. But I developed some great relationships on that tour that came back. I really enjoyed doing doing that. And then I kind of got into running production world tours for bands like Stone Temple Pilots, Nine Inch Nails, Jane's Addiction, all at once. And, so I would sometimes say I worked for 2 drug addicts and a psycho, and I didn't know which was which on a given day at that point.
Awesome.
And, I was making more money. And if you're doing this just for the money, I always say you're doing it wrong. It would have killed me. I made more money then than I do now. I knew I was in trouble during that period of time. I guess I look back now and read the books, and I go, that was actually going on that night. That was drug-induced by those guys. It wasn't they weren't sick or that. I was the guy loading trucks. I was the guy working.
So you weren't hanging out in the dressing room seeing the lines go up the nose?
No, I know. And what I did was I lived an hour outside of L.A., even during that period, up in a log cabin up in the hills above Claremont. And I always found that grounding. So I would drive home at night and wake up in a nature place and hear a stream. And then I would literally turn around and go back and work in L.A. But I kept that balance. And I think I've always tried to keep that balance in my life. I think if people know me, I try to keep some balance and separation between the business and my personal life.
Your office is out in Pasadena. Do you live out there too?
Yeah, I live up in Altadena now. Some people tell you when I grew up in Claremont, you're never going to make it in this business if you live in Claremont. I said, then I won't make it in the business. And I drove back and forth. I live in Altadena now. I've slowed my life down a little bit in the last 6 months. I closed the office in Pasadena, working out of my back house, 35 years now, kind of going, I just want to focus on quality of things, not the quantity.
Okay, and Warped Tour clearly had that same kind of festival vibe of a Palooza, but...
And I think that was a mistake in some ways. I think some people thought I was trying to duplicate Lollapalooza or go out and do that. But I've been bouncing back and forth, doing skateboard contests, the Vision Skate Escape, or the Swatch Impact Tour. Vision Skate Escape, I paid the Chili Peppers $250 to play on top of a ramp one day, and at the end of a skate contest, I kind of saw this lifestyle that we live with in Southern California, the skating lifestyle, and said, you know what? And I'd seen enough of the country by going on Lollapalooza and stuff, and I heard about the X Games being formed, that this is going to be something that they're going to talk about these sports that we kind of live here. And I was in the snow after a Board Aid show where we'd have snowboarding and we'd have skateboarding, and I convinced Perry to do Mountain Song. He hadn't played a Jane's Addiction song since he left Jane's Addiction, and it was Porno for Pyros. And he did Coming Down the Mountain, and I'll never forget this. Board across, snowballs flying, kids going bananas. And right after that, it kind of dawned on me that I said, this whole lifestyle that we lead is going to spread. With this, and maybe I should be doing it versus working for a big brand, just producing it for them. So at that point, I was about ready to get out of the music business. I was thinking that my first child was on the way, and that thing that most of you will get asked if you're a kid listening to this is, when are you going to get a real job? When are you going to get a real job? I was starting to get that mindset that I'm going to have a child. I might need health insurance. Life might be changing, but I thought maybe one last summer I would go out and do something with a skateboard ramp with some friends. I also realized that these bands were touring, just like now, we have bands touring every night. They're on top of each other. Every night in the clubs, there's bands playing. Let's maybe bring these together. There wasn't a community. A lot of things had changed in the business. So these bands, and the bands who I knew kind of jumped on board with me. Bands like No Doubt and Sublime and Quicksand and L7 and Orange 9mm. I wanted to go to an agent that really wouldn't have any bands to push on this tour. There would have been some agents that would have made a lot of sense at that point that worked in the punk scene of the music I did. I got introduced to CAA, which really didn't have any bands at that point.
Well, not in that punk world anyway.
No. So it was like they were able to work with my vision.
Think of Andy Summers or Stormy Shepard at that point, or
at that point,
Margie Albon, somebody in that kind of...
So we went over there, and a long, complicated story that I could go on for hours about Warped Tour, the mistakes you make when you start your first project. But we got it off the ground fairly quickly. I think people got into it with the idea that I was trying to duplicate Lollapalooza. I really wasn't. We went out. It was an absolute failure.
The first year was hard. I remember I was in Denver for that.
Yeah.
Originally, you guys were going to do it in the mountains, and then ticket sales were so dismal, you guys moved it down to Boulder.
And then that was the best, because that's a good story, because, oh my God, Barry Fay and his old Bill Bass. Yeah, Bill. Like, we showed up at this field at the school, and I went back to the University of Boulder recently, and I looked for that field, and it's still there. They've done some building around it. And we
next to Folsom Field.
We showed up, and a couple kids showed up and said, hey, we're here. None of the promoters showed up.
Bill was there for the first hour.
Maybe, and bailed. But then we looked around and realized that they had no concession stands. So we went out and bought the barbecues, and we were selling hot dogs and sodas for $1 each. So at the end of it, it was a financial loss, and Bill called me and was yelling at me or something about this bullshit tour. I said, hey, man, you gave us a bonus. And he goes, what the fuck are you talking about? And I'm like, yeah, we made $3,000 extra selling hot dogs and hamburgers because no one hot dogs and sodas.
So what's funny about this story, and I think you probably remember this, Bill left about an hour into the show. I was the only other person there involved, and Bill put a pass on me and said, "You're in charge." And I had a small production company in Denver doing club shows at the time, and I was doing most of the bands that were on Warped. But suddenly, I was running a 4 semi or whatever and 20 bus tour show, and I was the only person at authority. So Kevin had turned to me and said, "There's nobody selling water. There's nobody selling pot. Will you give me the authorization to go ahead and sell things here? The roadies are going to go do that." And I was like, "I don't know who else to ask for." He's like, "Bill said you're in charge." I'm like, "Well, then I give you the power." Do you remember that conversation?
I do. And it's funny how back then, back then we were working. There was a total of 3 trucks and 6 buses on that whole tour in the first Warped Tour. We shared,
which was the biggest show I'd ever worked.
We shared buses. And that was my concept of like community. I put Sublime, which were basically a bunch of drunken pirates with orange 9mm that were
L7,
vegans.
Yeah, it was such a great
L7
show.
And Chris Shiflett from the Foo Fighters has stories that basically he was sexually abused by the band every night on the bus. That it was definitely, we went out there. We had no concept of what we were doing. But when I tell people like they want to come into my office in and out and goes, "I want to start," I go, "Look, I was allowed to fail the first year because I'd worked so hard. People gave me that chance to fail, and I think that was because I'd worked so hard on Lollapalooza and when bands came through town and people knew me. So patience is still a virtue that can get you past this. So we got over that hump the first year.
That had to be a hard year coming back the second year, because that's a hard year. Everybody talks about building a festival. The first couple of years are going to be hard. But back then, people were just learning that. To actually take that second year after taking the lumps everywhere and trying to get promoters to re-up, because Barry Fay didn't come back to the table year 2. Doug Kaufman stepped up. Yeah. And there had to be a lot of that where the guys that lost the money didn't want to lose anymore.
Money, they didn't, you get lost sometimes in your own thing. And I was just like, we're doing. But then I had some fortuitous things that happened that year. Bands started talking, saying, "Hey, Kev's gone to something here." So NoFX and Pennywise, trust me, their agents at that point didn't want to talk about the Warped Tour. It was the artists, it was Pennywise meeting me like clandestinely after a surf session at Billabong and deciding they were going to do Warped Tour with me, and then us figuring it out.
Was it word of mouth from the other artists?
Yeah.
Was it they kind of saw the vision?
Yeah, they heard that it was a party. It was fun.
Okay.
I knew how to throw a party. Kevin Lyman's always known how to throw a party. And
that's a pretty good fact.
And that it was going to be a good thing. So all of a sudden, Pennywise, and then I hung out with Fat Mike. Fletcher called Fat Mike and said, "Hey, Kevin's going to come see you." And I sat in an alley and drank beers with him night and told him about this. And it was really driven by those bands that second year. Because I was the first crew guy, non-artist, creating a festival. I was the guy who loaded everyone's van. I think Greg Graffin still doesn't accept that I'm like his equal, even though we've worked many, many years, because I was the guy that loaded the vans, But we went out that second year. I remember many shows that we weren't going to get paid and things if we didn't do certain things. And I remember Scotty Gelman in Chicago, the lightning strike,
with Jam back in the day.
Jam. And he's like, "If you don't have every band play," and I'm telling the bands, "You guys, come on, this is the end if we don't do this." And bands were playing under yellow, blue tarps, and we're playing, and we pulled off that show. We also had a lot of problems that year. Contemporary concerts. I also
St. Louis?
And people ask me many times, like, "Why are you at every Warped Tour show? Don't you have anyone that can run it now?" I say, yeah, 95% of the time I have the best in the business. Most of my people now are running some of the bigger festivals or are involved with other people. Jeff Fortier was promoting a show in Lawrence, Kansas. I wanted to go home and see my child. My wife thought I could come home every few days. I get on a plane and fly home. By the time I landed, the Deftones had lit a bathroom on fire. My production manager didn't know how to handle it, so he took a forklift and drove it into the river. The mayor had just won on getting the river clean. It's the front page of the newspaper. Then the band went to contemporary concerts, and there was a merch thing, our merch thing. We kind of broke the rules of merch, as everyone knows. We reinvented the rules of how bands sold on tour. And they said, it's 30% rate. The bands, who I was managing less than Jake at the time, put up signs all over the bathrooms, fuck contemporary concerts, ripping off the public. The bands went across the street and set up in a parking lot right across from the venue to sell T-shirts to everyone. All of a sudden, we're outlaws. We were known kind of as the outlaw tour that second years. And luckily, those relationships saved me, because we had no money. Like, literally, where there's like 18 people in a 12-sleeping bus. We were just scraping around the country. And then I had a couple shows canceled, like Cincinnati. The word started spreading that this tour is just a bunch of pirates on the road, basically. And I really wasn't. I left for 2 days, which I've never left since, to be away from my tour.
When the cat's away, the mouse will play.
And then it was like, I remember, Marcel and Artie up in Buffalo, we had nowhere to go. So we were like for 3 days posted up backstage at Darien Lake. It's like they let us camp backstage, and we went to the amusement parks every day and ate macaroni and cheese for this tour. So we've come a long way, but those early days you learned and you build those relationships. And I think, there's some testament to being around for 23 years now, going out on our tour.
Which is incredible. You guys are like the longest running continuous tour, right?
Yeah, a festival. I think we're one of the last, and that's another smart thing I did. All these guys set up 3-day festivals and they get to go home. I have to go on the road for 2 months, and financially, we're challenged because we bring everything with us, catering, production, generators, everything, and set this show up in 3 hours and tear it down.
So one of my favorite things, I mean, we've known each other for a very long time, but, I mean, obviously go back to the first tour, but you spoke at Polestar right after maybe year 3 or 4. I think we're at the Century Plaza, and you were talking about sponsorship and the first tour and the Vans deal, and you'd made a comment that in the 11th hour, you thought it was going to be the Calvin Klein's Warped Tour, which I think you're going to love, Luke, right? And it's just like, it wouldn't be the same tour.
No, and I go back, and I wish my wife... And
everybody calls bullshit when I tell that story, so it's your story.
Well, what ended up happening was my ex-partner and another guy said, hey, we got to get some funding for this. And I have a friend who works at Calvin Klein. They'd love to talk to us. They're trying to get into skateboarding, get into this lifestyle a little bit. So my wife, who's a great artist, actually drew a skateboard ramp that said Calvin Klein Warped Tour at that point. I wish I could find it. It would be in the Branding Mistake Hall of Fame. So we drew this up. They went to New York with the last of our money. I found out they flew business, which was the last of my company's money. And they got stuck in that big giant blizzard of 1996, shut down the whole city of New York. They got stuck in that blizzard. During that moment in time, I got a call from Vans who said, hey, Kevin, we'd love to meet with you. Can you come? And I'm like, yeah, I'd love to come down for a meeting. So I went down to this meeting and got put in this little room, and Walter Schoenfeld, the CEO of Vans at the time, came in, and I respect him so much. He's passed away, but he was a legend. He helped found the Seattle Mariners, Shabende for jeans. He's a branding guy. And he comes in, and right away I kind of realized that he was talking to me about coming to work for him to help him with his amateur skate contest. So I had nothing to lose, and I said, no one's going to come see your amateur skating unless you're part of my successful music festival. Don't you know? Everyone likes to see music, and they'll watch skating and music. And I thought he was going to give me like $30,000, and he gave me $300,000 and became the title sponsor of the tour then. He also did an amazing thing for me the second year. He knew we sold the merch rights away, and he gave me the money to buy my merch rights back. So I've never given up my merch rights in my entire life for anything. So I tell people, hold on to the rights as long as you can. But it was going to become the Calvin Klein Warped Tour. Do you think Rancid have played that year? Would we have been where we're at? So, nowadays, there's a lot more flexibility in who can be involved in festivals and tours. We understand that. But we challenged a lot of brands. I mean, we were the first tour that Target did without putting Target under the bullseye. I convinced them that the bullseye was a mod, like a look for the punk world and the mod world. And we did a tent, the parents' tent that they designed for us. They didn't put Target on it, so I actually get a little credit for that branding from some people once in a while. We've pushed it hard. The energy drink category, I kind of came up with that idea that all the drinks would be in water cans. Remember the Warped Water? Right. Because he wanted everyone to drink his brands all the time. So anytime you see an energy drink at a Supercross race, NASCAR race, or anything, that's started on the Warped Tour, the cans of water. So it looks like you're drinking their brand. They get the branding without actually having an energy drink in the morning or get you going. They have fine, but you couldn't live on them.
Right. And that's a long day in the sun, and which has got to be an issue with you guys, too, that you're concerned about all these young kids out in the sun on some of these really long, hot days.
Well, that's been my things. The discussions I've had, some of them have been pointed through the years with the companies and saying, look, you're putting these kids in a situation. You can't charge $4.50 for a bottle of water. You can't not offer free water.
It's irresponsible because if somebody's on a budget, they could die.
Yeah, so, we had some good things. And
especially at Compton Terrace in Phoenix.
The meal passes, the things we've done. I can't look out for the whole business. I've learned, definitely, and I try to look out for this selective audience the best I possibly can and continue to do that. For this point, we're still out there. The landscape of festivals has obviously changed. Everyone's on the road all the time, but we've been able to maintain and doing okay. We do okay.
Well, and you were talking about that you guys were pirates, and the Warped Tour has certainly grown up to the point where your kids come on tour and jump on the bus and they roam freely.
Well, my daughter runs our nonprofit area, so we work with over 100 nonprofits throughout the tour.
Right, they're older now, but when they were younger,
growing up, Warped Tour was a great parking lot to grow up in. My wife goes, I never thought that sending kids out on the road would be probably the safest thing they could do, because the Warped is a family. It always has been a family thing. So you have eyes and ears watching, people looking out for your kids when you're out there. A lot of artists bring their kids now, or families out there, and you have everyone looking out for you. And she goes, I never thought it'd be also like, I know they'd be on the bus at 10 o'clock or 10:30 because we're always leaving in a hurry because we got to get to the next city. So they've grown up around that tour. And now I have a lot of second generation kids working on the tour in departments and things of people maybe that I worked with in the business and so on.
Super cool.
Yeah. It takes a village, but you just don't think the village is going to be a bunch of punk rock skaters with a bunch of tattoos.
Yeah, it's definitely changed. I was trying to describe, the way that we used to handle certain things on Warped Tour now with social media would not fly, you know? If we had a problem backstage and artists would say there was always the big brothers there that would sort us out. You know, the old punk guys would sort out the next generation and the next generation. We went back to that last year a little bit. I brought enough old bands that kind of sorted out the young kids.
Yeah, I noticed that you guys had done that. I thought that was a really cool
thing.
Or...
because this world of bands, you know, you need those kind of people out there that have been through the ropes. Otherwise, there's a lot of youthful energy out on the Warped Tour still.
And those guys, they command respect from these guys who might normally be off the chain, and all of a sudden they're heroes, and they're gonna
great influences too.
Yeah.
I mean, you get No Effects or a Pennywise Back on the Road or a Face to Face, and they're the influences of all those bands that are playing it. You get a Bad Religion, everybody's coming to sit on the side of the stage.
We've never flown like early Warped Tours with social media, like Cal Fletcher with his BB guns and shooting everyone on stage, and us putting ghost pepper sauce on a Zima bottle. You know, it was great. And I was just asked to write the foreword to a Green Day book. Started writing it last night, and brought up some memories of them out on the Warped Tour with us, and when they came back in 2000. When they were kind of in that limbo world of punk and right before the big albums came out. It's challenging now because, I actually hear, there's like, oh, that band doesn't want to be a Warped Disc band. And I'm like, who's a Warped Disc band? Everyone can play on Warped Tour. If you go through the history of Warped Tour, from Sugar Ray to Deftones to Eminem to, the Blinks, the No Doubts, to the past recent years, Echo Smith, BB Rexa busted her chops out there 2 summers ago and became a live act out there. If someone knows what to do with an artist after Warped Tour, they go on to be a great live artist. A person like Katy Perry has also become a great citizen to our scene. I think she's realizing her work she does with nonprofits and charities, still a big supporter of Music Cares. And I think, if you take full advantage of being out there, it's a great place to be.
Now, let's talk about the TV show for a second, because obviously Warped has become a fun and exciting thing to the point where people want to watch it on TV, and I'm addicted to it. I mean, I know a lot of these guys, so it's fun to watch them, but you guys are obviously getting good enough ratings where they've made multiple seasons.
Well, we have fun with it. It's trying to challenge yourself, but don't take it too seriously. We're not brain surgeons. We're not curing AIDS. We're just providing entertainment, so have some fun with it. And, we challenge, we try things. I was just sitting downstairs. I don't know if you've ever saw the Punk Rock Holocaust series of movies that we did. You got to look them up. We did movies out on the Trauma films.
How can our listeners find those?
You can find them online.
Is it like YouTube?
I don't think you can find them on YouTube, but search your Punk Rock Holocaust 1. We're about ready to get number 3. It's been about 10 years in the making. But we used to write movies on the Warped Tour, and you'd be out there, and the bands wanted to be part of this, be slaughtered on the Warped Tour. So we would film these horror movies that were written as we went. I remember Pennywise wasn't even on the tour, and they came in and said, we're getting killed in this movie. We're thinking about we need a Punk Rock Holocaust 4, but we're going to turn all the kids into zombies this summer to overthrow the government. But we always try to challenge and have fun, and we get a lot of business done while we're having fun. So we're doing that, and this year we launched the Warped Tour cruise that we're going to be going out in Halloween. We're doing the Halloween cruise because I think there's a demo, that 25 to 35, 40-year-old that remembers Warped Tour and those bands. So I put together a great package of bands, from Less Than Jake and Bowling for Soup and 303 and the Starting Line, a Juliana Theory reunion, American Hi-Fi I just added to the cruise. We've got about, of that era, and it's selling.
The Warped Tour of 10 to 15 years ago bands.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
So we're putting
classic rock Warped Tour.
Yeah, we're doing over Halloween weekend out of New Orleans. We're having the Dead Rock Star Ball on Halloween night. Come as your favorite Dead Rock Star.
Nice.
People have been asking me for 5 years to do it, but it just wasn't maybe feeling right. And now this year it's feeling good, and it's fun.
And this is like a full charter, 2,000 cabin.
6 man, yeah, 6 man working with them. They've been asking me for years to do it. I remember working on what you hear like, oh, they're not a real tour, they're not this and this. But in this day of festivals, in the world that we've grown into, the guys who've worked on Warped Tour are in high demand because the women and girls who've worked on Warped Tour, everyone knows they'll work hard. All the big festivals now, the department heads usually have Warped Tour experience. And they'll say, look, I'll hire a kid if it says they made it through the Warped Tour. I'll check with you, Kevin. But that tells me right away.
They made the whole tour.
That they'll work hard. They're not going to complain. They're just going to get out there and work.
Sets the bar, right?
So the 6-man cruises, and they do so many different ones now. That whole crew on those ships, because they have to move gear around, do so much, are all Warped Tour people. They all work on those cruises now. So they've been asking me for about 5 years, and I just felt it was time. It's like that It's Not Dead Punk Festival I did a couple years ago. It was time to show that punk rock is still relevant. We did it completely backwards. No one would want to do this as writing an offer if you're starting your career. But I said, I want to book this festival, and, I want NoFX, Pennywise, Bad Religion, Descendants. So I sent one offer to all 4 agents, put everyone on the exact same offer. And I said, I'm offering you all the same thing. The first time an agent took anyone off copy, I put everyone back on copy, sent it back so everyone had the exact same deal. And how do you...
Transparency.
How do you decide?
No,
how do you
we're doing
decide
this.
who the headliner is going to be? And I said, we're going to have a wheel on stage. So we did a Wheel of Fortune. We actually spun the wheel. It's kind of like when I said we're not going to tell the lineup of the Warped Tour ahead of time or write the schedule. We did it, and we got all 4 bands, and we had a blast. 22,000 people on a Saturday afternoon. Then, of course, everyone said, are you doing it next year? And I said, no, I don't want to be forced to do something every year. Warped Tour I do every year.
So you may do it again, but you're going to do it again
I'm
when it
looking
feels
at
right?
it. I think that's maybe the problem with festival. You have to do it every year.
I think that's a great thing that AEG's doing with Desert Trip, whereas they haven't been super quick to be like, and year 2. Like, how do they top that?
I sent
It
a
may
photo
take
to
a minute.
Paul the other day. According to High Society Thailand magazine I was reading at the airport the other day, they said, must go see Desert Trip next year. It was the things you have to see around the world, so they've decided. So I sent him a photo, though, Skip and Paul and Rick the other day, and said, looks like you must, at least this magazine's saying you're doing it again.
Jay Laciano told us a couple weeks ago in Aspen that they have no fucking idea who the lineup would be at this point. So.
Yeah, he said they hadn't even made one offer to an act at that point. I think it would have to be something super special to kickstart the whole thing.
Yeah, and maybe that's the thing. Maybe that approach, it's so hard because I watch guys curate trying to make their festivals each year and trying to make this. And that pressure now is just like to come up with those lineups every year and make them unique and bring that. I'm excited about this Warped Tour lineup. I'm looking at it's really different. Either it's going to work or it might be the end, but I don't care anymore, So.
Yeah, but you're out there. You're going to all kinds of showcases. You must use the internet to preview a lot of bands, but I hear that you go to more showcases and you actually go to Canadian Music Week and you'll pop into the room to see bands live. And I know you know more bands than probably anybody.
I still like doing that. I like going out. I like going to some of the smaller festivals. I've actually become a partner of one at Launch Music Festival out in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and I enjoy those smaller festivals where you can kind of not only go see a band and showcase with them, but you're going to run into them in a lobby and you're going to have time to talk to them and get to know them as people. And it's fun. It's been fun. Time is still that thing we still have to manage, but I love to still go out to those things. It's funny, South by Southwest, I may go speak at it or something, but it's weird with South by Southwest. You just start running in the same circles, and after about 2 days, because that's the world you run into the same people, where I'd love to go see a country band or I'd love to go see a blues band, but it's not my world of music as much as anything. So I'm in line with everyone else, and you're like, I can't sit, you just get nervous. And so those smaller festivals are great. I encourage anyone to go to those little smaller conferences and see showcases and stuff. It's a lot of fun.
So you're not a one-trick pony. As much as the festival is what you're known for, you had a record label?
Side One Dummy. I'm still partners with Side One Dummy. We're still releasing a lot of records. I'm excited about Andrew Jackson Jihads right now. They're doing great. A lot of new things, but we've also learned with the record label, we've kind of handed the reins of A&R to a younger set of people over there. We use our advice as mentors and things to help them. I enjoyed signing bands with that. Go-Go Bordello and Better and Sound Clash. It allowed me to sign bands because I signed everyone differently. I looked at them as a live act and taking a live souvenir home from a show versus trying to sell a single. I had multiple other festivals, but I'm really happy. Now it's like you don't look at awards in life, but now I just received my third. I guess it's that Lifetime Achievement Award. I've always said that Lifetime Achievement Award just gives you the bar tab to tell your stories, and I've never got one of those yet, but I've gotten a few Humanitarian of the Year awards. Those are the things I'm proud to show my daughters and involve them in, from Music Cares and TJ Martell and Billboard. So those are the things I'm kind of proud of. But, I branched my thought off into other things. We had some great success with St. Archer Brewery here in California. Going back to that skater surfer music lifestyle. We built a brand in 2 years, and it was so much fun. But I was going on beer sale calls. I was learning more about beer than I ever thought in my life. And we built that brand in a couple of years, a bunch of surfers and skaters, and we financed it a total different way. I was walking through my punk rock show, and some guy's yelling at me, sell out, sell out. And I'm like, what did I sell out now? Punk, metal, whatever. What did I do? And he goes, no, man, that beer. I know you're behind them selling to Miller Coors. And I'm like, no, whatever. But that's okay. Right now I'm excited about working with Haley Williams on her hair dye company.
Oh, cool.
That's going to be a fun project we're getting involved with. So, you just got to keep challenging yourself. Now, it's the nonprofits. I just got back from Myanmar, Burma, where we shot a documentary on human rights violations in those countries.
That are still going on today.
Yeah, it's been going on since World War II, and it's so unknown over here.
What are you going to do with the documentary? Do you have an outlet for that?
We're going to be showing it to the United Nations at the end of the March. That's the plan right now, to show them. If we still have it, we were joking earlier, it's not an executive order to end the United Nations in the next week or two.
And You mentioned earlier the festival not curing cancer, but then on the flip side, you dedicate a lot of time to organizations like the T.J. Martell Foundation, who is trying to cure cancer. So I'm fascinated that you are able to do both.
Well, it goes back to that history. I grew up in Claremont, California, and that was kind of a hippie town. David Lindley, Jackson Brown, those kind of guys all hung around Claremont. So it was kind of a hippie town. And then when I started venturing out and getting exposed to punk rock, I started realizing, and I know pretty much the same people, we were all trying to make change, maybe different ways, but really that's what it stood for. So like my wife says, you ruined punk rock by taking it into the sunshine, because that eliminated a lot of the violence that we used to have in the early days of the punk rock scene in L.A. By putting it, because 90% of the problems at concerts were caused by 10% of the people. So you put the problem out in the sunshine, people were actually able to listen to the music and not worried about getting punched in the face or hit. So I've always believed that punk rock and music is about change, about challenging authority. And I think many ways that first time when we did the Warped Tour, we were challenging all authority and all rules of producing something. Now many people have adapted those same policies through the years, and, you leave a mark. I also know I don't want to fade. I want to slip into irrelevance. I want to slip in on my own terms versus just hanging on in this business. So there's going to be a moment when I know
you don't want to be the old guy at the club.
I don't mind being the old guy at the club. It's okay to love music and do that. I want to still go listen to music, but you got to open up this world to young ideas and let them take the reins of it. So that's why I speak at colleges now. So many. I do 20, 30 universities a year now. I'm getting ready to help write a curriculum for a university. It's one of a lot of these places have live events curriculums, and I spoke at it. And I said, you need to change this curriculum because, okay. So they've invited me to come in and prepare people. If they're going to put them in event spaces, let's prepare people to be ready for it.
It's actually something you challenged me to do about 4 years ago at Billboard, was to start talking to kids more. And I did yesterday, and I have every year here, but there's an amazing satisfaction of talking to college students. They have actual interesting questions of how you develop a career, and they really want to know the answers. It's not like somebody that asks you a question and then doesn't listen.
Yeah, and I think this new wave of them coming out too are starting to understand that it isn't overnight, that it takes time, it takes patience. Bring your ideas, and we have to open up our ideas to them because they do have so many amazing things. They just need the chance to do them.
It's a great high note to finish on. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Motor 101 coming to you from Polestar Live with Kevin Lyman and Rick Farrell. Thanks so much.
Just listening to Kevin Lyman makes you want to be a better person.
I full-heartedly agree. I've known Kevin for about 20 plus years. Quality guy.
Hi, this is Steve Martin, not the actor, not the PR guy, the agent from APA. I'll be on Dan Steinberg's Perpendicular, fantastic psychedelic Promoter 101 podcast from South by Southwest, Thursday, March 16th.
Our second feature interview this week is best-selling author of over 12 books that truly changed not only how I do business, but my standard of living. I'm pleased to welcome to the podcast the great Jeffrey J. Fox. Promoter 101, super excited. One of my favorite authors is joining us today on Promoter 101. Jeffrey J. Fox is with us today. Jeffrey, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
My pleasure.
Now, you've written like 12 books, and they're all business-minded books, but they really break it down to the bare rudiments of how to get things done cleanly and efficiently in business.
Correct.
My favorite is How to Become a Rainmaker, and it really focuses on how to bring in business and really capture revenue from a grassroots point of view.
That's right. All my books are written to be read. That sounds very simple, but the fact of the matter is that 90% of all business books are only read, if read at all, up to page 12. And then they're put aside. And that's because they're so boring, or they're nuanced, or they're theoretical, or they have hypotheses. So I try to write my books from personal experience. I don't even research them. And I'm writing them as if I were writing them for myself or for my family or for the guys in the company. So you have to be, in this day and age, you have to be fast and simple and direct and correct. And you have to be readable. So, for example, How to Become a Rainmaker, like all the rest of my books as well, you can read backwards. You don't have to read chapter 1, chapter 2. You can read it from the end. And that's what people like.
Now, I'm not a huge reader, but I found these books at the airport 6 or 7 years ago, and I was coming back from the Polestar conference, walking through LAX, and I found How to Become a Rainmaker. And it's one of those books that's so easy to read. Some of the chapters are literally a page long.
Right.
But the things that you get in them, half of the summary is in the title of the chapter by itself. The Rainmaker's Credo.
Right.
Fish where the big fish are.
You're exactly right, because I have seen books, business books. For example, there was one that says, do first things first, and it's like 400 pages long. Well, to me, do first things first, that would probably be an entire chapter for me.
It's an amazingly simple read for me. And as someone that is jumping from thing to thing in a very social media kind of way, where I've got 3 screens up at any given moment, it's something that if I'm on an airplane, I can read 7 or 8 chapters and put it down, come back to it an hour later and digest more and reread them. But this series of books has literally changed the way I've done business and financially has affected my family's life as well as the size of my company's success. And I have to thank you, because it's not like we have a lot of authors on the show. We're an industry podcast for the most part, but your books, I think, are perfect for the rock and roll business on how it works, if not any other business. But it's amazingly how simple some of these things are and how well they're received.
Well, thank you. It is important for people to do the things that are in my books. In other words, if you really want to be a top salesperson and you read How to Become a Rainmaker, or you read its corollary, its sequel, Secrets of Great Rainmakers, all those chapters and the ideas within each chapter, those are all things that work. So if people do them, they'll be very successful.
Now, some of my favorite things that you've written, and they're all super simple in a lot of cases, like it seems like a given, but at the end of the day, it's like you got to do them or it just doesn't matter. You focus on you have to listen to the customer. It's
right.
One of your keys, right?
Right. And I do it differently than other people. Everybody says, listen to the customer. I mean, why do you have 2 ears and 1 mouth and all those kind of things? But the key to listening to the customer is A, crafting, pre-call planning, excellent questions that let the customer do the talking. B, taking notes, handwritten notes, not a laptop on the guy's desk where you're pounding away. And C, most importantly, you listen for something. Listen for facts, names, dates, numbers, places. If you are actively listening, you are listening for something. And maybe D, it's a 4th one. I'm going to put it in a new book I'm going to be finishing maybe this year. You listen with your eyes. You listen watching the person. What is he doing? What is she doing? What's their expressions? Are they being forthright? And things like that. So listening is a very easy skill if you do it that way.
So you're talking about actually connecting, like visually connecting, so they know you're paying attention.
Right. So you're taking notes. You're listening for something. You're paying close attention to the person. And they're asking questions that you have developed before the sales call. That's the key.
You have a handful of books, and I'm going to jump around a little bit. How to Get to the Top is the title of one of your books.
Correct.
Business Lessons Learned at the Dinner Table, which I love the name of that book.
By the way, that was supposed to be the original title, Business Lessons Learned at the Dinner Table. But my editors changed it to How to Get to the Top, which I don't, it's okay. But I love the business. And I interviewed George Steinbrenner and guys like that for that book.
There's some great contributors in a lot of these books. Kenneth Feld, who's one of the biggest promoters in the industry, was one of your contributors, right? He's a legend on our side.
Yes.
So quality is expected by the customers. I think that's one of the most sound lines I've ever seen in a book.
Yep. The determinant of quality is the customer. It is not the manufacturer. It is not the service provider. Quality is defined by the customer. People don't understand that. So you could have, for example, let's say the Queen of England was having a state dinner party. She might have gold and silver utensils. Same queen next day having a picnic out in the garden with her great-grandchildren might have plastic utensils. Perfect quality for each application.
Now, in How to Get to the Top, in a chapter called How to Listen for the Sound of Money, which I love the title by itself, by the way. On page 109, you say, you must listen for what you need to know to make the sale, cut the deal, and achieve your business objective.
Right. You must know what is the customer's problem, helping the customer articulate the problem. What are the consequences of the customer if they don't go with your solution? What is the budget? Can the customer afford your service? What is the dollarized value return the customer will get from your product and service? What is their timetable? Who are the decision makers? All of these things you have to ask questions and listen to get there. That's how you will make the sale.
You go on to have a lot of fun sayings, and one of my favorites, also from the same book, is there are no checkered flags for drivers in the pits. I love that.
I'm glad you reminded me of that one. That's one of my favorites as well. If you're in the pit, you're not racing. You're not on the track.
It's an amazing quote. One of my favorite things also from the same book is only hire people you would like to invite to your home to dinner.
That's correct.
So simple. It makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, you can have And most people do have a wide variety of friends and so forth. And you can invite odd people and quirky people and, you know, even people that are somewhat off-putting in various ways for one reason or another. And you don't mind inviting them to dinner, that's fine. But if you have some reason why you wouldn't want your family to be there, maybe the person's too crude or whatever, that's an instinct that you have that means it probably wouldn't fit in your culture. Probably wouldn't. I mean, you can have the quirkiest people in the world in your company. They could all be different, but they got to abide by the culture. And the culture is a winning culture. You're the custodian of that winning culture. You don't want to dilute it. You don't want to hurt it. In fact, I don't know if I put this in one of my books yet, but the winning culture is a company's immune system. It helps reject disease, and it helps eject disease. So one good rule of thumb, in my view, a hunching kind of thing, intuition, is if you wouldn't take this person home for dinner, you wouldn't take them in the office either.
That's interesting, and probably the reverse of that. Somebody that wouldn't want you in their home might be somebody you might be afraid to work with as well.
Correct.
Nothing a customer wants is a problem. I love the sentiment because we're a service industry, and this just lands for me time after time. The customer is our revenue in every stream of the sense, and if we're not making them happy and making their wishes happy, where's the business?
The customers will fire you in a second. Customers fire employees every day. I've kind of loved the Caribbean. I've always loved, you know, the Caribbean mantra. We ask anybody, no problem, man. No problem, man. I'll get it for you. No problem, man. I love that. And, you know, I did a survey one time or study or something for a large law firm. And I said to the guy afterwards, do you want the thick Harvard Business School report or do you want the simple of it? He said, give me the simple of it. I said, we do two things every day. One, when you have a client, I'm talking to a client, you remember their case is their only case, and you got 1,000 cases. You have to tell a guy, don't worry about it. I'm working on it. I'm on the game. Calm them down. And number two, return every call every day. Just do those two things, and your business will boom. And he did, and it did.
It's amazing how many people don't return calls or emails. And if it's not a spam, I'll return everything. And I've noticed that it leads to amazing things, networking-wise. It's been an amazing, amazing process for me.
Well, on the returning of calls, you know, if your client is a corporation, it's okay to call after 5 o'clock or after 6 o'clock when you can leave a voicemail. All they want to know is that you care about them. When it comes to an email, you know, I'm always worried that people get mine. So I 100% of the time, like you do, 100% of the time, I respond to legitimate emails. I either respond in total or I just write got it. My clients love that. They love to know I got what they sent and that I'm working on it.
Confirmation.
Right.
Makes sense.
Total.
Now, you go on to say that salespeople are the rainmakers, the big money makers. They always ask for the sale.
Right.
You go on to talk about this a lot in your books. Most salespeople miss the shot because they forget to ask for the sale.
Oh, they don't forget. They deliberately don't. They are afraid of rejection, or they don't know how, or they're not listening carefully to a buy signal, or they haven't practiced enough. Only 5 to 10% of all salespeople are rainmakers. And many of those people are heads of their own small businesses. And maybe 100% or 90% or something like that of successful small business retailers, restaurateurs, name it, are pretty good rainmakers. In corporations, in big corporations, or in corporations of 10 salespeople or more, only 5 to 10% are rainmakers. And those people do something that the ordinary salesperson never does. A, they always pre-call plan every sales call, every contact, every voicemail, every email. They pre-call plan in writing. B, they always dollarize. They calculate what is the return on investment the customer is going to get from the product or service the rainmaker sells. They understand the return, the quantified money. The rainmaker will help them either reduce or cut costs, grow gross margin revenues, or avoid the costs of a punitive future event. And C, they always ask the customer for a commitment to an action that leads to an order. That may be, can we get started today? Do you sign the purchase order? Do I have to go to somebody else? Or maybe it's to get a second meeting, or maybe it's to get them to agree to come and visit a beta site. Whatever it is, whatever your sales call objective is, that you know is part of the sales cycle that leads to a sale, you ask the customer for a commitment to do that. You ask the customer for commitments to actions that lead to a close. And that's what the Rainmaker does on every single call, even if he's been calling on the same client once a week for 20 years. They never wing.
Coffee's for closers, right?
Right.
So let's talk about dollarizations. You've written a couple books on the topic, if I'm correct.
Right.
It's basically monetizing how what you're talking about or trying to sell your customer monetizes that process for them, how the dollar effect will return to them long run.
That's right. You'll see on every website and every ad, everything in the world, you'll see that the advertisers and marketers claim our product lasts longer. Our product is quieter, taller, more robust, faster, reduces labor. When the customer hears or reads that a product lasts longer, what does the customer know? The customer knows nothing. You have to quantify lasts longer. Ours lasts for 6 years, 2 years longer than the other guy. So that means in 12 years, or say 13 years, you buy 2 of the 6-year life products and you buy 3 of the other. So if the price of the 6-year product is, say, $100 and the 4-year product is $80, absent dollarization, all the customer has is price, $100 versus $80. But if he knows he's going to use it for 8 years, 12 years, or whatever, then the customer buys 2 of yours for $100, the 6-year one, and 3 of the 4-year one at $80 for $240. So 200 versus 240. So the dollarized value of the quote-unquote higher priced product is in fact the lowest cost. So dollarization is taking any claim, any point of difference, quantifying it first, and then calculating the dollar value of it second. I'm working on a product problem now for one of my clients that has introduced a breakthrough product in the heating, ventilation, air conditioning business. It's a type of fitting that eliminates brazing. And brazing is a mechanical installation technique that involves welding guns and that kind of thing. This product eliminates that. So if you bought a brazing fitting, if you were the manufacturer and you were going to do an installation of a large HVAC program at, say, a grocery store, you could buy the fittings that you're going to braze for $1. If you were going to buy my client's products that eliminate brazing, you pay $10. So it's a 10-to-1 price disadvantage. I'm going to show with dollarization, when you eliminate higher priced labor, you do it 5 times as fast, you eliminate nitrogen tanks, you eliminate leaks, you have all these various product benefits. When you dollarize them, the $10 fitting is less expensive than the $1 fitting.
Which makes sense. And in rock and roll, I think the country mega ticket, when you buy 6 tickets at once instead of buying the 2 shows for your package, shows the better value. And that's how that works out to the fans. And the industry's adopted that exact same concept of the season tickets and the value package of giving it to the fans and that better value by buying additional revenue packages.
Right.
I want to jump over to how to be a fierce competitor.
Okay.
What winning companies and great managers do in tough times, which I oddly picked up right when the economy was in the worst place.
Yeah, right. And by the way, at some place everywhere in the economy, or certainly an economy like ours, somebody's always in tough times. I mean, products and markets have cycles and whatnot, and there's always tough times somewhere.
So you say dead wood employees don't produce results.
Correct.
You expand on that a little bit?
Right. I mean, what happens over time is that companies allow mediocrity to creep into their place. And that's because they had a weak manager someplace, a C manager. C people always hire Ds. You get mediocrity, or you get a situation where the company has grown past them, and they're still stuck in a place somewhere, or they've started afloat with things like seniority, which is a ridiculous concept, and you end up with deadwood. Everybody in the organization knows they're not contributing like they should, and what you have to do, and you have to do it with salespeople all the time, is determine whether they are profit positive or not. And that means after you add up all the compensation and all the direct and indirect costs associated with that person, whether it be training and management, desk, coffee cups, whatever, salary, vacation, you add all that up. And can they quantify, or can you quantify, that they've delivered to the company directly or indirectly gross margin revenue that's greater than their total cost?
So your dollarization of them, are they added value to the company, or are they actually just sucking out revenue?
Exactly. You dollarize them. And if they are not net profit positive, they should work someplace where they will be.
Now, you go on to talk about some companies forget that without selling, without customers, there's nothing.
There's nothing.
I love this statement.
Yeah. I mean, I ask sometimes at talks when I ask people, even rooms full of very experienced salespeople and business people, say, what's the most important thing you need to start a company? And they'll say the plan, the people, the idea, financing, etc. And the answer is no. It's a customer, either today or certainly someday tomorrow. Without a customer, you have nothing. And people forget that all the time. I just had a client of mine who decided he's got to educate his people. They're losing sight of how important the customer is. And we have all the paychecks stamped. This is customer money. We have to impress on our people all the time that we work for the customer. Without the customer, there is no revenue to pay rent, to pay the utilities, to pay mortgages, to pay car payments. Without customers, there is no business.
I couldn't say it better myself. I love that you go on to say a sales meeting is a money meeting.
Totally. Every meeting is a money meeting. But a sales meeting, has to be every word, every sentence, in my view, no matter who delivers it, has to be something that helps that salesperson emotionally, psychologically, skill-wise, whatever, to make more money for herself, himself, and the corporation. You don't want to get up there and ramble on about, diversity training and compliance regulations and the new dental plan and all that. You can send them that. A sales meeting, taking people out of the field, is very expensive. You want to make sure that every single word in that sales meeting has a return built into it. As a matter of fact, every meeting should be a money meeting. If you have a meeting and you're the author of that meeting, you invite only people there that can get something out of that meeting or contribute to it in a way that helps the company get and keep customers today or tomorrow.
Now, you go on to say that investing 10 minutes every day in a sales meeting will jumpstart revenue. So you're not talking about meetings have to be 4 hours long.
Right.
Meetings can be quick.
Yeah, right.
Just to the point.
Look, at good companies have daily safety meetings. I was at a big oil company giving a talk, and they had their safety meeting beforehand. It was a couple of minutes long, and it told people, don't let your little children drink stuff that's under the sink in your kitchen. Well, duh, but that's not the real point. The point is they have a safety meeting every day. Well, safety meetings don't bring in revenue. They don't bring in customers. They don't bring in or keep the good clients, but sales meetings do. So if you can have a safety meeting, you can have a sales meeting, 5 minutes long. You assign the sales meeting to all your different salespeople, and you're going to tell us how to pre-call plan on the irate customer. You're going to tell us how to handle the I don't have it in my budget objection. You're going to give us a 5-minute sales meeting on asking questions. You can do that simply, but assigning salespeople to prepare and to present the meeting helps them learn as well.
Now, you've got a chapter called Worship at the Altar of Quality. I love the titles of your book. You really don't even need to read the entire book. You can just read the topics and figure out which chapters you really want to get into mostly. And by the time you're into them, you're going to wind up reading the rest of the book anyway. But it's a great way to jump into it. And in that chapter, you talk about customers define quality, not the seller.
Right. Customers define quality. Customers decide whether your hamburger is well done or medium well done. They want it well done, give it to them well done. And they know what that means. The customers are always ahead of the marketers, oftentimes. I'll give you a specific illustration. I have a client that said that their on-time delivery to Ford Motor Car Company was 96.7%, and they were so proud of it. The only problem was Ford wants it 100%. That's their definition of quality from this supplier, 100% on-time delivery. I have a client that makes bearings, and the engineers are deciding what quality is. The engineers decide that quality is a bearing that goes 1,000,000 miles. Okay, that might be something of interest to intercontinental trailer truck drivers, but to the guy who builds golf carts, a 1,000,000-mile bearing is way over-engineered. They're perfectly happy with a bearing that goes 500 miles. That's their definition of quality, a bearing that fits my particular application and needs. The engineers that designed the Million Mile bearing have to understand that.
They're paying for the overkill.
And they don't want to pay for the over-engineered portion. But, engineers say, oh, no, quality is how long it runs. Maybe not.
Now, you talk about good companies are not shy about letting their customers know why they love them. I think this is fantastic.
Absolutely. I mean, how many of people in your audience have today written a handwritten note to thank a customer for something, or to thank someone for referring them to someone, or to send them an article of interest in their industry? I write, I guess, about 400 Christmas cards every year. I don't send an electronic Christmas card with a reindeer jumping over the fence. And if the person doesn't open that electronic Christmas card, it gets dinged 100 times until they do. I have Christmas cards that are always designed subtly with a fox somewhere on the cover, and I sign them personally. And I say, thank you very much for your business. Put $100,000 in your budget for Fox & Company next year. We really appreciate this and that. I have clients that have kept them for 25 years. I didn't know that, but I found that out recently. It is so important to tell a customer that you appreciate their business. The other day, I'm on a Delta airline flight. I'm like everybody, you guys, a zillion-mile flyer or whatever. And I get up to use the bathroom. When I came back, there was a handwritten note on my chair that said, Dear Mr. Fox, thank you very much for being a valued customer of Delta Airlines. We appreciate serving you. Handwritten note by one of the stewards on the plane. That's smart. I remember that. People don't get handwritten notes anymore. They don't even get personal letters on stationery. It's a point of difference, and it's memorable. And what would you rather do business with? Someone that likes you and appreciates your business, or someone that never even remembers you were there?
I am a fan of people I like drinking beer with and doing business with those people. So that makes a whole lot of sense. And I have taken the card sending personal thank you notes right from your book, and it's part of my daily process.
Absolutely.
And I see results from it. People like it. I hear from them. They call me. They'll drop me a note saying, that's the first card I've gotten in ages.
Oh, yeah, right. Exactly. You know, the television show that was on years ago, Cheers, it was the Boston bar. It says where everyone knows your name. Now, that's a welcoming thing. I just did a little thing for the Chamber of Commerce down here where they asked, what could we do to build business in town, have evening walkabouts, wine and cheese walkabouts, and things like that. I said, why don't we start by teaching the small businesses how to treat their customers better? What do you mean? I said, for example, a guy's got a sign on his door, closed. Well, how about see you tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. instead? That's a better way to do it. How about businesses that have their telephone numbers on their trucks when they should just have their town so people can find out how to get a hold of them? No one's going to write down a telephone number of a truck going 50 miles an hour. And this is going to give you an unbelievable thing. There's a florist in this area. You shouldn't say this area. There's a florist. It's closed every Sunday and Monday, regardless of the fact of Valentine's Day is on a Tuesday.
I imagine they opened for Valentine's Day.
No, they didn't, because they're closed every Sunday and Monday.
That may be one of the most short-sighted people in the history of business of flower shops.
Yeah, it's the dumbest thing ever.
It's like a pizza place being closed during the Super Bowl. It makes no sense.
It makes no sense. It makes zero sense. There's an art gallery and whoever owns the place thinks it's really cool and edgy and on top of things because he has a sign that says open. And he reformulates those letters when he's closed to say nope, N-O-P-E. Nope. That's ridiculous. It's negative. It's anti-customer. It's not friendly. And, every time you see it, you remember nope. You don't remember open. You expect it to be open. There's a little place that says, we only accept cash. This is a handwritten sign. We only accept cash. There's an ATM at the bank across the street. Well, what about the people that don't want to pay with cash? They want a credit card for a receipt or anything or something for business. What about the people that don't want to walk across the street because it's raining? What about the people who decide to walk across the street, and this is also a fact, they encounter a competitor to the store that only takes cash? How dumb is that? And it's a fact, they do that. But isn't that amazing how little things that are so common sense people do every day, regardless of what you tell them?
So now I'm going to tie this back to the industry. This is the club that you try to book and they tell you they only book on Tuesdays and Thursdays after 4 o'clock to 4:15. This is the guy that doesn't take your phone call or return it when you're trying to rent his venue, so you wind up going across the street and renting somebody else's. The concept of not taking the call, the not taking your money, to stand there with your checkbook in your hand and saying, who do I make the check out to? And them saying, we don't need that, bring us cash. Confusing people to me, and that's where it sources from. Little things like this that say no to your business, that it's not valuable enough to them, that they're willing to figure out a way to accept the money you're trying to give them.
Do you know that 40% of all salespeople, and those people you're talking about just then are salespeople, or at least they're supposed to be, 40% of all salespeople never follow up a lead. Never. Forget calling once or twice. You know, something like 80% of all sales calls are made on the seventh or subsequent sales call. But 40% of all salespeople never follow up on the lead. We do analysis all the time of our clients who have trade show conferences. They generate 100 leads. Let's say they're all qualified. How many are followed up, do you think, in the first month?
You would hope all of them.
7 out of 100.
We're an industry-heavy business, so that is amazing to me because the money that is invested in these industry meetings is ridiculous going to these conferences. So to not follow up on every lead is just turning away money.
Yeah, totally. How about this? Another fact, 70% of all salespeople, and this is based on surveys of hundreds and hundreds of buyers, 70% of all salespeople are completely unprepared when they make a sales call. Completely unprepared.
Now, let me ask you, are some people good enough at sales that they can do it from the hip if they know the product line well enough?
No, that gives them an advantage. But what they don't know is what happened to that client yesterday. Did he get a new boss, a new competitor? Was his budget cut? Was his job changed? What happened? So you have to go in prepared. It is, in fact, the guy that knows the business well, who knows the product line perfectly, and who's smart. These are the people who make the mistake of not being prepared. It is so easy for the best salesperson in the world, in their own eyes, to wing it. And yeah, once in a while they make a sale, but you really have to be prepared. I don't care how good you are. And I see it all the time. I see it with people that sell life insurance, leasing people. It's amazing how unprepared they are. Here's another example. You know, I'm on the circuit sometimes, as you know, they say the networking circuit when people are looking for jobs. People will come in, I'll see them because somebody's recommended them or whatever. They'll come in and they'll say, okay, what does Fox & Company do? What does Fox & Company do?
That drives me nuts. If you don't know, why'd you take the time to call me?
Why'd you visit? Where's your notebook when I'm giving you suggestions? Why aren't you taking notes? Why don't you send me a thank you note after the visit? Why do you call me when you get fired a year later? People really have no sense of who's the customer. There's a customer in every transaction. And in fact, the Rainmakers they do another thing in pre-call planning. They answer the following question. It's the most important question in business. If I were the customer, knowing what I know about the market, the competition, the products, etc., why would I do business with me? And if you can answer that question honestly, objectively, fact-based, and hopefully in terms of dollars and cents, you have an ironclad platform to make that sale. It's just like the advertiser. Why should the reader read my ad? Why should the shopper pick my package? Why should this company hire me? You've got to answer that question because only you know why the customer should hire you. And if you can't answer that question, you're not going to be able to formulate reasons for why the person should. So it's very important in pre-call planning to do that. And the great salespeople will tell you that. You know, they'll always tell you that I pre-call plan in writing. I mean, after a while, maybe you only need to write down what is your sales call objective, to be sure you stay on target. But I encourage everybody to do the things that the Rainmaker does. Pre-call plan in writing, dollarize and sell money, and get a commitment to an action that leads to a close.
Because if you can't sell yourself, you can't sell anybody else.
Right, totally. Pre-call planning gets you way more confident and way more at ease.
Excellent. Which book of all of them would you suggest people start with? I would assume How to Become a Rainmaker?
Ooh, which children should I feed? Let me answer this in a slightly different way, okay? My very first book was How to Become CEO, and that was written originally for my kids and the kids of our clients, and it actually was how I was discovered because it was written as a handout I did at a talk at a college. It wasn't titled. The title was after I got an agent and published it. And that's a great book in my view, because it's for ambitious people. How to Become a Rainmaker It was just selected as one of the 100 best business books ever written. And I think that's a terrific book for anybody that wants to persuade and anybody that really sees their livelihood based on selling hard goods or professional services or that type of thing. My third book was How to Become a Great Boss, and that's required reading at a number of companies. And that's another book if you're involved with people that you have to manage and so forth. I wrote another book called Rain, What a Paperboy Learned About Business. It's different than my other business books in that this was more of a chapter book story, and I mistitled it. My ego got in the way. Rain is the name of the paperboy, a 13-year-old paperboy who delivers the morning paper in New England. And I just assumed it's got a glorious cover and everything. I just assumed that everybody would associate Rain with Rainmaker and Jeffrey Fox and all that, but they didn't. But regardless, this book is a series of short chapters where the kid has to solve problems like a mean dogs and a bully and people who don't pay their money and winning a sales contest and so forth. You get that on audio too. Oh, by the way, that book won the #1 business audio book of the year one year. So it's a great little storybook. And, I like all my books, to tell you the truth, at different times. One of the books I wrote, it was originally published, it was called Don't Send a Resume, and it was renamed in another banal name, I think, which is How to Land Your Dream Job. And that's a book on marketing oneself. And although it's about getting a job, it really shows how you treat yourself as the product and how you have to dollarize your value and so forth. And that book was a cult item in universities for a long time. So that's another pretty good book, I think, depending on, what your circumstances are. I love Fierce Competitor, which you quoted earlier. And, it depends on where you are in your career and your age and your need and all that kind of thing.
Well, I tend to give kids that I'm mentoring a copy of How to Become a Rainmaker, but I will admit I prefer How to Get to the Top. I think it's possibly my favorite of all your books.
It's one of my favorites too, and I just wish they had left the original title, Business Lessons Learned at the Dinner Table.
And make all of my marketing kids read How to Become a Marketing Superstar as well, though.
How to Become a Marketing Superstar is my best book in terms of content. It's my longest book, which is usually not good, but it's not very long, as you know. And I agree with you. This is the book that marketing people should read. One of the weird ironies in the world is that a lot of marketing people already think they're superstars, so they don't read it. But I'm with you. I love the little actual marketing challenges I put in that book, too, where those are real stories, too, by the way, where it's raining and the guy has to help the shoe shine guy sell stuff. Things like that are really, I think, of interest. But that Marketing Superstar book has got some real solid rules in there that you'll see violated every single day, 1,000 times a day.
Must drive you nuts when you see these things in real life.
Well, you know what I thought? When I started Fox & Company, I thought with so many salespeople unprepared, billboards that are ill-conceived, new products that fail in vivo, etc., that companies would pound their way to my door, but only good companies do. The good companies, the General Electrics of the world and things like that, really Parker Hannifin, Caterpillar, wonderful companies. They're the ones that's hard sometimes to do business with them, I'll grant you that, but they're the ones that are open-minded. They're continuously learning. They're looking for things, or they realize they may not know everything. They may need to rent some expertise. These companies that put billboards up there that you don't even know what they're saying, and you got to see it in a quarter of a second, or their salespeople come in with, stains on their shirt and stuff. Why don't they look for help? I don't get that.
To each their own, and they got to find their own path. I know that I followed the books quite closely. I picked what worked for me, and I got to tell you, my life has financially been changed. I am living proof.
Well, I appreciate you saying that.
I'm proof that the book works. Go ahead and buy it. Go to Amazon. They've got a page devoted just to Jeffrey J. Fox books. I would say start with How to Become a Marketing Superstar, How to Get to the Top, or How to Become a Rainmaker, or even How to Become a CEO. Doesn't matter where you start. You're going to pick up one and you're going to want to buy the rest of them. Thank you so much for taking the time and talking to us today, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
If you're not already on Amazon searching for all of his books, we'll leave you a link on our Facebook page, The Incredible Jeffrey J. Fox.
Cannot recommend enough to pick up his book. I suggest you start with How to Get to the Top. It's a personal favorite of mine.
Hey, Harlan Fry here from Atlantic Records, sitting with my good buddy Dan Steinberg, Promoter 101. Let's go.
Gerald B. Henley is known throughout the industry as one of the most outgoing, likable personalities. He is responsible for booking the Fox Cities Performing Arts Center.
Promoter 101, we're joined in the suite today by the king of Appleton, Wisconsin. Welcome, Gerald.
Hey, how you doing?
It's good to see you, man. Polestar Live in full effect. Luke, what do you think?
Coming to an end here. We're lucky to have run into Gerald here, and he agreed to do this podcast. Pumped to kind of be closing out from this Polestar Live 2017 with you, man.
Thank you very much. Proud to be here, man.
So my first moment, I bump into Gerald like 5 minutes being at Polestar. And he's immediately like, when am I going to do the podcast? He's like, you haven't anybody black on yet. And I was just like, it's the internet with no video. How the fuck do you know we haven't anybody black on? He's like, dude, you can just tell they ain't carrying.
No, it's kind of like me when I'm doing my Black Elvis show, because I have been known to, put some Blevis out there. And
we wanted you here for your personality.
There you go. It's the same old, same old. I was born, reared, and educated on the south side of Chicago. Went through some stuff down there and graduated, left there, went up to Wisconsin. Did you notice how I said Wisconsin?
Hey, you didn't say Chicago.
Yes, Chicago. I spent some time up there and went to college, got everything all squared away, and then went to work in this business, in this fickle business that we're in right now. And that was over 40 years ago.
So you said you came from Chicago. We just had Brian O'Connell in for the podcast, and we had to ask him the question, Al's Beef or Portillo's?
Not even close. Portillo's.
There you go. That's the way. Now here's one. White Sox or Cubs?
Oh, White Sox.
Oh, Southsider.
Let's get O'Connell back in here and have a fight.
You'll never even hear me utter that 3-letter word.
You still call it Comiskey?
It's still Comiskey. It'll always be Comiskey.
It'll always be Comiskey.
Yeah, I grew up right across the street from Comiskey in the Rob Taylor homes. So, it'll always be Comiskey, and it will always be the White Sox.
Yep.
Yeah. There's a reason why they have a definitive line. It's called the North Side or the South Side. And, people on the South Side, we don't cross that line.
All right, so you're close enough to home. You can drive down for some Italian beef anytime you want, but you live in the heart of Wisconsin, cheese territory. Tell us about the season, the venue, and why it's been so successful.
I manage basically a 2,100-seat building. We've had a fantastic year this year. Did a lot of really, really good shows. Do about 8 weeks of Broadway. I fill with about 27 shows. Promoters come in the building, rent the building. I go it alone often. We call that PAC Presents. And we also co-pro with people.
So people like Don Kronberg, right?
Yep.
What are the things that drive you when you're booking a season? Because everybody can book shows that just make money, or at least they try to. But there's got to be more to it than that, because you don't do it as long as you've done it without having some kind of drive. And what is that for you?
I grew up in this business. My parents got me downtown to taking saxophone lessons. So I was 9 years old when I started playing saxophone. By the time I was 13, I was recording with Marshall and the Shy-Lights.
Really? What did you play?
A saxophone player. Yep. So just so you know, I still get a check every 6 months for $11 because I'm on this song called Tell Me Have You Seen Her?
Are you really
Have
on that?
you seen
We
her?
know that song.
Oh, I see her face everywhere I go.
Have you seen her?
Even at the picture show. Have you seen her? Yep. So, I get a check every 6 months for about $11 on that one. So I had the music in me. That's when it all started. So ultimately, I ended up, again, playing in high school, playing in a band called the Gents of Soul.
Oh, that's smooth. The Gents of Soul.
Good evening. We're the Gents of Soul. We had our outfits were purple suits, and we had another jumpsuit thing that was a one-piece kind of leotard that we used to wear, but that was just fine. So we went through those days and those changes. So this was in the, I'm talking about the late 60s, early 70s. Played in high school, and then boom, graduate, went to college, played basketball there, but still knew that I was going to get back into the music. So I ended up getting a degree in music theory. I've got a degree in all the applied saxophones, and I also have a degree in pre-law. So I'm living the life. I am doing what I graduated to do because I'm doing all the contracts, the writers. Started working at Summerfest down in Milwaukee. So I've been
legendary festival, yeah.
That is the world's largest music festival. 11 days, 800 bands, a little over 1,100 contracts.
Okay, so what are the favorite things that you book?
I'm into pretty much contemporary rock. I mean, I like, the Kansas and Moody Blues, whether it was, my first real rock show of Fleetwood Mac and Wishbone Ash.
Wow.
So I played in high school at Dunbar in Chicago. I played against some of the greats that are out there right now. Now the guys that I played with are coaching. Isaiah Thomas, he's Doc Rivers.
Yeah.
All those guys, yeah. Either they were in my conference or we ended up playing against them once we got to the quarterfinals or semifinals or something like that.
What was Isaiah Thomas like in high school?
A good player. I mean, yeah, he was a very good player. I've lived a weird life. I mean, I was 9 years old and I watched my first guy get killed right in front of me. Yeah. So it kind of gets you ready for, I learned a lesson right then and there of what 3 seconds means. How you have 3 seconds to really make a decision about something and be prepared to live with it for the rest of your life. Yeah, it's great that I was able to get through that.
But you're always so upbeat. You're always so personal to people. How do you maintain that energy and positivity? What's the secret?
If things aren't worth doing, don't do it. I mean, I'm always looking at the bright side of things. I start out every conversation, whether I'm in front of kids and talking about my life and struggles that I went through for them to get to a place in life. God bless me. I will tell everybody that. I start the conversation off with that. Yep, God bless me. You're not going to live or be in the same type of life that I'm going to be in, but you can yourself be that way. The door gets open just a slight bit. Get in there and then start talking about yourself, what you've done, and all of those kinds of things. There are a lot of people out there that are willing to give you a chance, and that's really what it's about. When you get that chance, be sure that you know what you're doing, how to do it, and those kinds of things. I was actually talking to some people today and helping them understand how to settle a show, what all goes into the settlement of a show.
The concept's not that hard. We take all the expenses, we put them together, we take a percentage of that, and we add it into the number, and then we split what's left with the artist.
Whoa,
I
what's
know
this
it's
percentage part
I
you're
know that
talking about?
sounds difficult, but that means we have to be there at the show that night. Okay, well, we'll let you do it in the morning. Oh.
That would not be good.
See, the thing is, I don't want to do the math.
And I don't want to be there in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I'm bad at math. I'm just saying that I don't really want to be accountable for anything.
Right.
So, and that's kind of the vibe. It's funny because there are shows that we've gotten in venues that have sold out before where settlement didn't work over well. So the show came to us to play the room again just because they accounted badly for the show. And it's just like, oh, here's a show that's going to sell out the room. And they lost it because they can't do the math.
They can't do math.
And it's not even because they can't do it, because the sheet does it for you. You take a minute and write the Excel sheet. If you don't know how to write it, you get a grad student, you pay him $500, and you let him write the sheet, and the sheet does the math because Excel is built to do that.
Or you can contact me. I'll sell you one of mine that's got everything already built in for $499.
You're beloved in the arts world. You're beloved in the rock world. There really isn't anyone that doesn't love a little Gerald.
Again, I'd like to thank you very, very, very much. I just try to do what I do. Be a really, really positive force or positive entity around a bunch of people. And, again, you get more flies with honey than you do with a baseball bat. So,
I like that you started somewhere where it was like you suddenly got stoned in the middle. I wish we were doing video because if anyone else could have seen the pause, it's like you catch more flies with honey than where am I?
What am I doing?
Baseball season's coming up. Yeah. What the fuck was that, man? Anyway, it's great to have you on Promoter 101.
So you're more than welcome, man.
Dan and I ran into Gerald B. Henley in the hallway at Polestar recording the interview, and he's just one of the absolutely nicest guys to ever come in the show. Love Gerald. If you're in Appleton, Wisconsin anytime soon, be sure to look him up.
Maybe you can get him to do his Blevis for you. That's his version of Black Elvis. It's outstanding.
Hey, it's Elliot Lefkoe, promoter from Golden Voice in Los Angeles, and I'll be talking to Dan, Promoter 101 from Canadian Music Week on April 19th. So sharpen your skates and smell the ice.
That's it for Promoter 101 this week. On deck for next week from Paradigm, Agent Tom Windish. A preview on the ILMC conference, Atlantic Records' Harlan Fry, and Adam and Nathan from Royale Entertainment.
Be sure to catch us live as we come to a conference near you on the Promoter 101 World Tour. March 8th and 9th, watch out, Great Britain. The Yanks are coming to ILMC at the Royal Garden Hotel. March 8th, Steiny's moderating the YouTubers, Money and Millennials. It's a panel featuring Free Focus and Kilimanjaro Live's Mark Walker, WME's Alex Boulay, Mainland Music's Mark Lambolette, and YouTube star Rose and Rosie.
March 9th, we'll be in the Highgrove Suite ILMC recording interviews for the podcast with special guests from Sire Artist Management Adam Parsons, as well as Wizard Promotions' Julia Franks. More names to be announced very shortly, but pop on in and see us do some live interviews.
March 16th, South by Southwest. Come drink some Shiner Box and enjoy some barbecue as Steiny hosts a conversation with APA's World Head of Music, Steve Martin.
We'll also be throwing an after party with APA at Frank's, starting at 3 p.m., going to 5. That's in Austin at South by Southwest on the 16th of March. April 19th, Canadian Music Week 2017. We've got a great combo. Golden Voice's Elliot Lefko and UTA's Jack Ross with a few other surprises.
Keep on the lookout for some great guests coming up to the show, including Ticketfly's Andrew Dreskin, ICM Partners Andrea Johnson, and the reigning king of comedies agent from Gersh, Rick Greenstein.
If you have any thoughts about the podcast or a suggestion on someone who we should interview, we want to hear from you. Send us an email or any ideas to steiny@promoter101.net.
You can follow me on Twitter at WLukePierce, and you can follow Dan at The Jew.
Be sure to subscribe to Promoter 101 wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you like what we're doing, please tell a friend about us or drop us a line. We want to know what you're thinking.
If you have any questions, you can always go back and listen to some of the past podcasts at www.promoter101.net.
Past guests include Brian O'Connell, Jay Marciano, Tom Ross, Brian Penix, Jamie Adler, Jim Runge, Mark Geiger, Bill Siddons, and Shep Gordon.
I'm Luke Pearson for Steiny. Have a great week.
This is Andrea Johnson from ICM Partners, and you're listening to Promoter 101.